Hey everybody, hope and pray that you're doing well today as we come to our word from the word. And today that word is complaining. Complaining. Now, the one good thing is as we're reading in scripture and we see people complain, we can think, man, I'm so glad that we don't have anybody around like that today. Right? If you're like me, many times people might ask how my day's going. I say, well, it's going fine. No use complaining because it won't do any good anyway. And then most of the time we'll follow that up by complaining about what's going wrong. I mean, we all do it from time to time. Some maybe more than others, and maybe more often than others. But regardless, I wonder as it comes to the things of God, I wonder how often we are complaining about the provisions of God, and maybe even what our idea of what God should be blessing us with, or what questioning what He has blessed us with, or just forgetting that He's blessed us already and forgetting that He's going to bless us in the future. And when we get our eyes off of all the things of God and we start looking around at the world, then all of a sudden we become dissatisfied with what God has already given us. So today in Numbers chapter 11, we're going to read the first three verses. And it says, "Now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord. For the Lord heard it, and His anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned around them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them." Now, it goes on to describe that even the mixed multitude, even the worldly that were there kind of gathered along with the Israelites, the foreigners who had come alongside them, that's kind of where the murmuring began. But then it infected the people. And the Israelites here on their, now get this, on their third day of journeying from Mount Sinai on the way to the promised land, they begin to complain. Same thing, 3 days after they left Egypt on their way to Mount Sinai, leaving Egypt, third day they began to complain there as well. And it seems to be this, as we know, the pattern is not just the Old Testament, throughout Scripture, is that really that God puts out rules, puts out the law, the people sin, he brings his wrath and in judgment, and then they ask forgiveness, he forgives, and in his mercy, maybe he doesn't do as much as he said he was going to do, because of his love and his mercy. And this is that kind of theme, especially through the book of Numbers, through the Old Testament, through the Israelite history. But even with all of that, it's something to think about, the murmuring and complaining that's going on here. One commentator put it this way: he said, "Those who murmur without cause are soon given cause to murmur." In other words, when you start complaining when you really don't have any reason to, God's going to give you something to complain about. Now, as always, I encourage you to read on and read this whole chapter. We're going to deal with this chapter today and tomorrow, and then even into the beginning of next week. But it's something to look and see that the people are complaining because they're eating that bland manna, that boring manna. Some say that it was bland and boring because God never intended for them to stay in the wilderness as long as they did, but it was their sin and their wickedness essentially that kept them there, and that God wanted them to desire something more. He wanted them to have that desire for the promised land. And I think about just how that plays with us today, is how often we complain about the manna that we're getting now. But the only reason that we are continuing to have maybe that bland manna, is because we have no taste for what more God could give. It's almost as if, well, this is what we got, and we just kind of throw our hands up and we say, well, man, I remember the stuff I did back when I was in the world. I remember what I did back before I came to Jesus, and man, that stuff seems like, it was better. You see, that's essentially what the Israelites were doing, because they would always go back to, man, I remember the great food that I had in Egypt. Now, they always forget the fact that they were slaves and that they were, tortured and beaten and treated horribly as slaves. And yet they forget all that. And yet you and I do the same thing. We begin comparing ourselves to the world and saying, look what the world has, and look what, I feel like I can't have because I'm following after God. Did you not forget that before you came to Christ, you were bound for hell? And that those that are still living for Satan are still bound for hell? But that you have been blessed by God because you saw the light, and God stirred up in your heart and he called you to himself, and you accepted that call to salvation, and now you've placed your faith and trust in him, and now he has promised you blessings, some on earth, but plenty, oh my goodness, plenty in our forever home, right, in heaven. But how often do we complain about the here and now, but we forget what God has already saved us from? We're getting ready to celebrate Easter this weekend, Good Friday tomorrow. And to think about, Christ didn't die so that we could complain and desire to go back to what he saved us from. So let's let this be a challenge to us today, to be careful how we complain. To be careful those things that maybe irritate us, or maybe we begin to have a desire for things that we shouldn't. Maybe we need to take a moment and say, God, open my eyes, open my heart, that I may see and desire the things that you would have me to desire. God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.